That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, the people keep asking, and I have a hard time saying no. I don't have kids, but I feel like if I have, especially a little girl, don't feel like I'm going to be able to tell her no. I can't tell our listeners no either, and they keep wanting Jimmy Stein. So I hit you up yesterday,
nice.
and you were gracious enough to hop on with us again to we kind of previewed A-Day a little bit last week. Now it's time to react. We do have some video clips to kind of discuss, and we'll be going over those periodically. But first, before we get into that, we'll start off with, your initial reactions to Alabama's A-Day practice this past weekend.
Well, it was interesting. Obviously, I've seen every A-Day going back to the late 80s. So I don't believe I've missed one. If I have, I don't recall. It would have been maybe one somehow, some way. But so it was very unique in the sense that we haven't had a format quite like that. But, I enjoy it. Like I say all the time, for people that I don't want to see practice, I want to see a game. I mean, when I'm in South Alabama, it's like a 7-8 hour round trip for me. I've got no problem doing an 8-hour round trip to watch practice if I'm able or gifted the chance to watch a whole practice. So that didn't bother me. I think there was a lot to take from it. And start with the quarterbacks, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a lot. But I saw plenty of reason to be optimistic. That to me is what A-Day is about. Are we seeing things that give us some hope? Are we seeing things that give us some confidence that the team's going to be good this fall? And where are, issues, but also where are the assets? Where are the good players? You've usually lost a handful of good players. Are they being replaced? How are the young guys looking? Heck, one thing that's dramatically changed about these spring events over the years, Clint, is all these new kids. They're basically all early entry guys now. Back in the day, that used to never happen. Then it happened a little bit. Now it's just completely common that they're basically all out there. And we used to not have that in the spring. Now we do. So we got to see Jackson Lloyd and Michael Carroll and Ivan Taylor. We got to see all those guys and how they're doing with just the 15th practice of their college career, to say nothing to Keelan Russell. So I saw plenty to be excited about, and a couple of issues, but of course there will be.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I talked about this yesterday, but this is the battle that we always talk about in these types of settings. Defensive line looks good. How much of that's the defensive line's that good? How much of it's the offensive line isn't as good as we think? Or vice versa, or wide receivers versus defensive backs. Like the wide receivers look pretty damn good. We're super high on the defensive backs. So we think that means the wide receivers are really, really good. Some people might say, or the defensive backs aren't as good as you think they are. We'll find out soon enough when it goes. Well, I say soon enough. We're still several months away, but we'll find out eventually when we start seeing these guys go against Florida State and Tallahassee. But yeah, I'm right there with you. And speaking of the quarterback battle, I thought it was interesting. I guess we'll go ahead and play it. And so we're going to be pulling up some of these videos. I'm not great at this, so this might not be a smooth transition as maybe some people do. But Ryan Grubb essentially said that if there was the game tomorrow, Ty Simpson would be the starting quarterback.
Right.
A lot of time between now and, when they face off against Florida State, so that can change. But I want to get his kind of reaction.
Part, I felt like, we really pushed that room a lot this spring. And, I know everybody wants to know about that position and where things are at. And I would say this, at the end of the day, if we're playing a football game tomorrow, Ty Simpson would start, and he earned that. Okay, and I know that's the line everybody's looking for, but that is what he earned. Austin Mack made huge strides. Also, available reps were the same, and he did a really good job. He came out and developed, just was some of the nuances and take care of the football and things like that. Thought Ty showed out a little bit better. And then, honestly, Keelan exceeded my expectations. I think for a young man his age, he never gave into that opportunity. We challenged him with that. Don't give into, I'm a freshman and this and that. And he didn't. He reminds me, I say this all the time to him, and I mean it as the biggest compliment. He reminds me so much of Michael Penix, just in his demeanor. He has such a calm demeanor. Sometimes, you need to find the other edge of that and put a little bit of rush on it. But he did a great job, and he had a couple days at the end that, You know, he wished he'd played a little bit better, but man, I thought he made huge strides. Those guys all, you know, Nick did a great job of managing the number of reps for guys, trying to keep the opportunity very equal. And by no means does that mean that we're playing a game tomorrow, you know, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think the message really is that, you know, we got to be even better. And the guys, you know, I know that they'll take that the right way and they understand those things, but essentially, you know, we're not going to be satisfied with the quarterback room until it's how it's supposed to be. Man, it wasn't perfect this spring, but I thought we were trending the right way the entire time. And so the competitive spirit and the acknowledgement of each other as a competitor in that room was very mature, honestly, you know, and it could have been very different than that. So I'm blessed to work with those guys every day. I'm fired up. We got 3 really, really good quarterbacks.
Yeah, Ryan just told us that if you guys played tomorrow, that Ty would be the guy at quarterback. What did he do this spring that made him, you know, Ryan want to say something like that? And for you, where do you see that position right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of great things they've all done. Ty continues to you know, I think move trend upward. I think all of them have really, you know, added to their game. They're all at different spots because Keelan's learning the system. You know, the other 2 know it better, for sure. And Ty, you know, has been around and, you know, just has done a nice job. You know, I think the trending upward is a big piece of it. Ty's an accurate thrower. You know, there's always going to be balls that every guy wants back, but I think the ability to learn from your mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes, you know, be able to comprehend things, not be overwhelmed to think that, you know, he's just had more time. But, you know, they're all doing a lot of really good things together as a group. But now I will say, like, we're not where we need to be at the quarterback position yet. And so, you know, I feel like that exists within our team to have that level be accomplished. But, you know, this is part of the process. I shared with our team, we're not where we need to be as a team. I hope we don't ever think that. It's never been that case everywhere I've been. Any year I've been a part of to where you finish spring ball in April and you're like, okay, we're good to go. You know, people ask, are you ready for the season? You know, no, I'm not. You know, we got a lot of work to do between now and August. And that's the case, I think, with the quarterback position.
So Jimmy, you know, that was kind of what we were expecting to hear. Now, granted, maybe not them saying that Ty's would start if there was a game tomorrow. I thought that was an interesting wrinkle. But I think they did a really good job of kind of announcing that, but also making it clear. I don't think they presented it in a way where Austin Mack's going to feel threatened or feel like he defeated, like the battle's over. So kind of what were your takeaways from that?
Surprised that Ryan Grubb said what he said, but I'm not surprised at what he said. I mean, I you know, someone that watched, you know, 8A, you know, and heard from sources, and you know, I know you'd been to a couple of practices. You know, I'm not surprised that Ty is ahead at all. I fully expected, even going back to the Michigan loss, day after the Michigan loss, that Ty Simpson will be the starting quarterback on the next team. That's what I've expected. So I'm not surprised that Ty's ahead. I'm not surprised that if they were playing this week, Ty would be the starter. I'm not going to be surprised when he trots out there against Florida State's a starter. But I am a little surprised that they said it, because mostly what you get, of course, is some coach speak. That was not coach speak. That was telling us how it is. Now, why? You know, I hate being a little cynical, because it's not really my personality to be a little cynical, but I am a little cynical about this. You know, the portal opens Wednesday. Let's be honest. I think the last person in the world, the normal casual fan, sits around worrying about in that portal is Ty Simpson, with good reason, all sorts of good reason. But imagine if that statement had gone the other way. Imagine if that statement was, they're all even. They're all even. We don't know who's going to start. We love what we saw from Keelan. Austin Mack getting better all the time. Ty's the older kid, but he hasn't won the job. They're all even. So imagine if that's the statement, and then the portal opens Wednesday, and Ty gets the DM from another Power 4 team that says, you're not the definite starter there, but you're the definite starter here, and we'll double your NIL money. You know, that's going to be enticing for a kid who doesn't know where he stands. And in other words, what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's conspiracy. I think they told the absolute 100% truth. But I think they felt it needed to be said out loud, you know. So Ty knows exactly where he stands at Alabama right now. So he knows where he stands. So Austin knows where he is. So Keelan knows where he is. It's only fair to those guys that they know where they are, because here comes the DMs. I mean, the portal opens Wednesday. So the cynical side of me is always looking at that portal and NIL and kind of saying something negative. But I think that's kind of where we are. But no, I fully expected Ty to be in this position. And like I've said all along, and I've never changed, and what I saw Saturday is it did not change my mind. I think Ty Simpson's going to be a really good quarterback at Alabama, not just the quarterback. I think he's going to be a good quarterback.
I agree 100%. And this can be a really, really good football team. I want people to stop and think about, okay, how good can they be with each individual quarterback? Especially with where they're at. Like, based off of what I saw from Mac, he is pressing. And that's something else that I want to talk about. He's pressing because he's currently behind, and he knows that. He's not, Ty gets to kind of be a little bit safer, and he especially gets to continue to be safer as long as Mac continues to press and it not work out. If he was pressing and he was making a lot of wow plays, and these things that he was trying were working, there would be more pressure on Ty to kind of step up and maybe do some of that. And then we would probably, we would really see what Ty was about. But as long as he's, trying some things, taking some risk, and it's really not working out for him, he's throwing interceptions, he's making decisions he probably shouldn't. I did say that, as he was, I watched him on 2 separate occasions. One of Mac's big problems is, it was on the I think it was Zabian Brown interception. He's looking right. That's where his primary reads are. But then when he works to the backside, there's a backside post going. You've got cover 3, so he knows that safety is going to be in the middle of the field. So when he goes to throw the football, he overcompensated and he threw it too far inside of that post, and it put Zabian Brown in a position where he could go up and get it. It's like, that's not a decision you make. That's really not what I would call it's not a cover 3 beater, a post. Because you're running that post right into that middle of the field safety. He also did it on what should have been a 3rd interception with Cam Calhoun, where he's looking left. That's where his primary is. Works back to his right. Forgot who the receiver was, but Cam Calhoun was in coverage. It was really not there. He pulls the trigger. Cam Calhoun jumps it, ends up barely, not being able to secure the interception. And that was in the end zone. But that's something that, like, Mac's doing a lot right now. The more you kind of, if you would see some of these things working out for him, then I think there would be a lot more pressure on Ty. But right now, Ty's in a pretty good position because he's working within the offense. He's taking what the defense is giving him. I thought we've heard that about him throughout the spring. I thought he definitely showed that on A-Day. He's not doing anything that just blows you away or wows you. I don't really think that like Michael Penix did, but I think he did it in a way where it was kind of, some of the throws were just, crazy. But I think probably the best thing that he did, the best thing Michael Penix did, was play within that offense. You really never saw him go off script. He wasn't really an improvisational style of quarterback. He operated from the pocket. He would be mobile when he needed to be and extend a little bit, but it certainly wasn't really where he was super comfortable, which is why I think he struggled against Michigan in the national championship game. But it's like, I just feel like Ty Simpson, from a demeanor standpoint, a talent standpoint, 1st round, top 10 potential, Keelan Russell is more Michael Penix than anybody on the roster. But I think what Ty is doing that's more Michael Penix than any of the other guys is he's playing within the offense. He has a great understanding of it. Now, granted, as we've talked about, the more Keelan Russell gets comfortable, the more dangerous he's going to become on that front. But right now, I think Ty's doing a really good job of just not feeling like a couple of years ago in this competition, Nick Saban kept essentially saying, neither one of these guys need to be Superman. Just, use the playmakers that we've put around you. There are some, and Milroe had a tough time with that. Simpson had a tough time with that because he was a backyard style of football player in high school. I think he's really learned from that, and he's doing that because now I think you've got even more playmakers than you did when Nick Saban was making the same statement a couple years ago. And I think that is why Ty's in the position that he's in right now.
As usual, we're just so on the same page. It's crazy. We're always singing from the same hymnal.
I like that.
For a reason, we just are. But Keelan, to me, looks like he's the most gifted. I mean, that Keelan Russell is the most gifted of those 3 quarterbacks, which is saying a lot because Ty was a 5-star. Austin Mack as a quarterback kind of looks like someone you built in a lab. But Keelan Russell is the most gifted of the three. He's still learning the playbook. Nor should he know the playbook. That's not a criticism. There's no way he should know the playbook. He's practiced college football 15 times. He that's it. That's it. That's all there is. He doesn't know the playbook, and he shouldn't know the playbook, but he's very gifted. As he learns the scheme, the system, the plays, he's going to be making big leaps and bounds. That's why Ryan Grubb didn't say Ty Simpson's going to be the starting quarterback in the Auburn game. He didn't even say Ty Simpson's going to be a starting quarterback in the Florida State game. He just said if there was a hypothetical game tomorrow, Ty would start it. And I think one of the reasons you got to throw that caveat in there and be accurate is Keelan's going to be improving by leaps and bounds as he learns, as he goes. But he's not in the picture today because he doesn't know the playbook like he needs to, and he'll learn that. Austin Mack, as you put it so well, couldn't agree more. When I see Austin, I see a guy trying to win the job and he's behind. I mean, it's no different than it's the fourth quarter. Look, when it's the fourth quarter and it's 27-13 and you've got the 13, that script, the game plan you worked on all week, that's gone. That's out the window. That's flushed down the toilet because you're 2 scores behind and there's 10 minutes to play.
Right.
Austin's playing like that to me. Like I'm 2 touchdowns down, there's 10 minutes left, and I've got to, I know the primary read here is the slot is running a curl, and I'm looking at the safety, and if the safety comes up and plays the curl, then I go deep. But if the safety goes deep, then I throw the curl. Well, the safety went deep and he threw the bomb anyway. I mean, because he's trying to win the job. That's an overstatement, over exaggeration, but that's just kind of what I see Austin pushing it. I mean, he's just really got his foot on the accelerator, and he's got to remember that he's just going into year 3. And while that is a turning point for a lot of quarterbacks, let's remember that he's a reclassified kid. So is he really going into year 3? I would argue he's kind of going into year 2.
That's right.
Because that's what he would be if he'd completed high school, and gone through the 12th grade. Ty looks like the veteran quarterback who has the job. And he's very comfortably saying he's kind of like the leader. We're just coming off the Masters. He's kind of like the leader on the leaderboard that's got a 4-shot lead. That's the only one out there going par, 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 par. They give me the green jacket. I just got to par out. They got to catch me. And while they're trying to make eagles and birdies, they're more likely to hit it in the creek or the woods. And all I got to do is make pars. Ty's making pars. And while that doesn't sound spectacular enough, and it's going to take more than pars for him to be successful this fall, it's all he's got to do now. And hey, if Alabama last year played at quarterback and the quarterback played even par, you might be in the playoff. You wouldn't have won the national championship. You probably wouldn't have beaten Georgia, to be honest. You probably would have lost to Georgia. You might have lost to Baton Rouge for all I know. But you play even par golf, you probably win. You probably beat Oklahoma. You probably beat, Michigan. So Alabama could use some pars, at that position. And I think that's kind of what you're getting with Ty, though that's underselling his tools a little bit because he's a toolsy kid. Any kid that has 5 stars coming out of high school, that is based largely on plus tools. You have tools that experts have deemed are way above average. And he does have plus tools. And I think Alabama fans will see that this fall.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence, speaking to that more as far as the other guys playing from behind in this situation. These last couple of days, Ryan Grubb mentioned, these last couple of practices probably, something that Keelan wants back. He didn't have his best performances in those last couple. It's like you only got a couple of more chances this spring to position yourself to be going into fall with a lot of momentum. Maybe he pressed a little bit. Maybe he made some decisions he shouldn't have made. So it's like, and by the way, that's something else that Ty has dealt with, playing behind Jalen Milroe, competing with him as the younger guy a couple of years ago. And then last year, you bring in a new coaching staff. It's like, well, maybe they will open up the competition because we weren't sure if Jalen Milroe would fit in Kalen DeBoer's offense. But, it was clearly that having Jalen Milroe back after the successes that he had in the previous season, it was pretty clear that he was always going to be playing with the lead there. And I think probably Ty pressed a little bit too. That's part of it. So we're going to move on because the running backs are next. And this is something, of course, that we had heard multiple times throughout the spring. This only confirms that. What I love about these press conferences from yesterday is that they confirmed a lot of what we had been told. And so that makes you feel really good. But Daniel Hill was someone that was brought up specifically by, and actually it's possible that he was asked, Ryan Grubb was asked about him. But
so.
Either way, he's a guy that both Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer both address.
Running backs, how do you kind of foresee how spreading the ball out at that position? And is there an ideal number maybe that, you kind of like at that, like in terms of carries?
Well, I think last year's squad would probably tell you 6 ain't enough. It's running back's a tough position, and that's a physical position to have to play every day. So I think the development of that spot, even when you feel really good about maybe your top 3 to 4 guys, you still know like there's a opportunity for the 5th guy. And so I think developing the guys behind those top 3 or 4 is critical. I feel really happy to where we're at. I think obviously, Jam is the elder statesman in the room and certainly has the most experience. And I thought it was really good for me to see Jam the last couple of scrimmages when we were live. It was the first time I'd seen him out there breaking tackles and, just kind of showcasing some of the things that he can do. He's an extremely bright player, understands pass protection very well. And then obviously Rich is a guy that's played some ball here as well. And different skill set, a little more of just the straight line physical runner. But I was surprised, honestly, when Coach G talked to me about Rich, how much, kind of pass protection was an issue as far as last year for him, just understanding schematically what was going on. I think Rich put in a lot of time and really improved himself as a pass protector because it surprised me, honestly, that, when he said that, it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, wow, I feel like Rich has done a good job of being dialed. And then Daniel Hill, I thought, was one of the guys that maybe stood out as much as anybody this spring. I thought he really did a nice job. Physical runner, very nimble for how big he is, can stick his foot in the ground and get vertical. Excellent pass catcher out of the backfield, showed a lot of toughness throughout spring. And I thought he really showed up quite a bit and improved as much as anybody out there.
Ryan Grubb just told us that Daniel Hill stood out as much as anyone this spring. Just kind of what did you see from him in that running back room?
Yeah, I was really excited to see Daniel. He last fall, and still even this spring a little bit hampered a little bit with just some tweaks and injuries and stuff. And, he'll end up being a really good one for us. We know that. And I felt like there was just enough that you did see last fall where he's got those just those instinctual things and running and cutting and things you expect out of a tailback, but just some subtle things that a 245 pound guy doesn't do as easy as he does. And then even catching the ball to the backfield, just natural that way. He had some runs when we were in live sessions where, whether he was bouncing off of them, I think it was more of them bouncing off of him. That was really exciting to see. And he's really developing a mindset and trust and belief in himself. And that's carried on through the rest of the team. So he had a really good spring for sure.
So first of all, that's going to play a lot better on podcast because I forgot to remove the other video. So it was playing audio for audio for Grubb, and it was showing Kalen DeBoer. And I was like, it took me way too long to realize that was going on. I also didn't know as soon as I clicked it that it was going to immediately pull it up and start playing it. So I was in the middle of a sentence and had to cut short. So like I said, not great at this, but very informative. What I like about these press conferences and the reason that I wanted to put such an emphasis on going back and listening and then reacting to it is that it was so informative. And I think kind of the most non-coach speak, giving you kind of how they feel about a lot of these rooms exiting the spring. Now, they weren't really down on anybody. They acknowledge, Austin Mack, decision making a little bit. Like they'll mention, kind of some issues guys are having. They brought up Richard Young and just the fact that maybe the pass protection and understanding, where he needs to be from that standpoint. There were some struggles there, acknowledging that he's gotten better, but just this running back room, Jimmy, I mean, it really does feel like, is it like the most talented group in the country? Are they like the most dynamic players? Not necessarily, but I think when you talk about what we think Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb's offense is supposed to look like, I definitely think you got some Dylan Johnsons in here, and I think you got multiple of them. So I think you got a really good, strong, complementary running back room.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm glad you mentioned Dylan Johnson because I think of all the running backs in that room right now, maybe Daniel Hill is the most Dylan Johnson-like, and that's who they just had tremendous success with at Washington. To me, with my brief looks at Daniel Hill this spring, um, he looks. This could be wrong. Maybe somebody in the strength and conditioning can DM me and tell me this is wrong, but he looks sleeker to me. I see a little. I don't know that he's lost weight because maybe he replaced a little bit of baby fat with some SEC muscle, so maybe he didn't lose weight, but he just seems sleeker. And I see a little bit more burst. He's never going to be the burstiest guy out there, but there's a little more burst. And I'll be honest, I would say Daniel Hill will be on the short list of bigger surprises to me this spring, because going into the spring, I would have predicted 3 or 4 things before that. I'd have predicted, okay, Jam now looks completely comfortable now that we got the quarterback RPO kind of minimized instead of being the offense. Jam looks better. 2, Rich Young has turned a corner and is the dude. Wouldn't shock me. And a guy that I've talked up a little bit, Trey Washington, the transfer from Louisiana, who's very experienced and tough. And I thought that might be something nice added to this group. I would have believed all 3 of those things before I believed a sleeker, burstier Daniel Hill became a thing. So
Right.
I'm a little surprised, but it's great news because inside that big old dude is a good back, exemplified the whole time by when he was in high school at Meridian, Clint, during the summer on the 7-on-7 stuff, which isn't about, he wanted to do 7-on-7, but they don't run the ball 7-on-7.
Right.
That's a complete throw the football thing. So Daniel Hill's like, I want to play 7-on-7 with my teammates, so I'm going to play wide receiver. He played wide receiver an entire summer. And those hands are so unique for a guy that's built like he is. And notice that Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer mentioned that about Daniel Hill being able to catch the ball. I think Hill's, I wouldn't say emergence because that's not fair. We don't know how much we'll see him actually with Jam and Rich and even Dre Washington, a senior out there. I don't know how much we'll see him, but I think Daniel Hill's a big story this spring. And I'm now pretty convinced that at some point in his Alabama career, Daniel Hill will be a significant player at Alabama.
Yeah, I hated not being able to see him on A-Day. And that's one thing, like, they did acknowledge the fact that he's dealt with injuries. And so you talk about, look a little burstier. Being healthy can certainly do that. And what I want to point out to people is the explosive plays are going to come in the passing game. Like, you got a lot of dynamic players in the passing game. You don't necessarily have to have 40+ yard touchdown runs and 60-yard touchdown runs where, guys are, you don't have to have Jahmyr Gibbs and that home run hitting ability at running back. That's not what Washington had with Dylan Johnson. It was more of it's kind of funneled through the passing game. You got receivers that a variety of skill sets that can do a lot of different things. You got, at least some sort of presence at tight end that's doing some things for you. It's a good offensive line. It's a quarterback that can distribute, be more of like a point guard type. And then it's a running back that really just keeps the defense honest. The fact that you're straining them the defense so much through the air, there's such an emphasis and a focus on that really just putting this kind of power back. It's kind of like Tennessee. People don't realize that Tennessee's offense, like, it spreads you out to create run lanes. That's the primary reason they want to spread you out so much. And it kind of forces one-on-one matchups. When you're that far out, you really can't get help as much as you want, especially like that star nickel position. It really strains that guy because that guy's supposed to help in the box or supposed to help as a run defender, but when you're that far out, it takes you a while to get down there. And Tennessee was good at running the football. And so it's like they spread you out. And then if, you wanted to react to that and they didn't like the matchups that they had out there on the perimeter because you were doing some things to compensate, then they would just run the football and they would run it off tackle and they'd have a lot of success doing it. So it's like this isn't that exact style of offense, but what it is doing is kind of using the passing game and how you operate to really set things up for your run game. And you really want that guy who's going to be able to handle some volume as far as out of the backfield, be able to catch the football, but also be able to pretty consistently be a very physical guy that is going to, while you're spreading teams out, defenses out, you're still in the SEC. You still want that physicality. You still want that punishing running back that defenses just really don't want to hit. They really don't want any part of it. So you don't lose that element and become too finesse. The run game is still a really important element of the offense, but it also is kind of a complementary piece. And I think Daniel Hill and his skill set is a massive part of that. I know, one of the things, I think it was Ryan Grubb that brought it up, was Jam Miller's pass protection.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He also talked about Rich, kind of struggling in that area last year, but he talked about how Jam has a great understanding of that. I know you probably saw it. I saw it. I thought it was one of the best plays that I think any guy made on Saturday was QB Reese is coming on an A-gap blitz. He times the snap perfectly. He comes completely free, and Jam Miller stuck his nose in there, and it was like it was like a stone wall. And granted, it ended up still being an incomplete pass, but the quarterback was able to extend and give him time, get outside the pocket, wasn't able to make a play. But like Jam Miller, that element of this, I think, is going to be really, really important. I'll be curious to see how this running back room ends up looking.
No, and the pass, particularly if you're going to be a throw-first offense, and I think ultimately that's what DeBoer wants. Ultimately, when they're comfortable with everything, that they're going to throw it a lot, and it's going to look a little bit like what Washington looked like in 2023. And if you don't have a running back that can pass protect, then it ain't going to work. And I say this all the time. I think it's one of the things that kind of separates maybe the casual fans from others. But pass protecting backs, if your running back has 18 carries and 162 yards and 2 scores, everyone universally says, wow, they look at the box score and they're like, well, boy, what a game. What a good player. If that same guy failed to pick up the blitz 3 different times and got the quarterback sacked twice and walloped 3 times because the back didn't pick up the blitz, that kid doesn't need to play. He can't play. It doesn't matter that he picks up some yards with the ball in his hands because he's going to get the quarterback killed. And we've got to throw the ball to have any sort of success. So that's how vital picking up that blitz is. It's the way to get on the field. If you can't pick up the blitz, if you can't pick up, you don't need to be out there because you can't lose your quarterback.
Especially when you've got 3 scholarship quarterbacks, by the way. When
got
4,
yes.
Maybe you're a little bit, more.
Yeah.
But this might be a big reason why we only saw Richard Young at the end of games last year when they were just turning around and handing him the football off because he wasn't being asked to pass protect.
That's a great point. And yes, that happens. I know years ago, for slightly older fans, I get asked all the time, why didn't Kenyon Drake play more? When Drake was a younger player, and that was the answer I was getting from inside the program, is he wasn't good at, he was getting the quarterback hit, and again, it doesn't matter how many yards you rush for if the quarterback's getting hit and it's your fault. So it's vital. And when he said that about Jam, I mean, my first thought, boy, Jam needs to play the most snaps because they want to throw the ball. They want to throw the ball. If it was a running offense, then it matters less. And in high school, it matters less because, I mean, that stuff just doesn't, you don't see, wake me the next time that you're watching high school film and you watch the running back make a block to pick up an extra guy. I mean, yeah, it happens, but it's not a thing that they build the running back position around. College and the NFL especially, a throwing league there, you gotta have a running back who can block. So I think we'll see Jam quite a bit.
They changed the rules for quarterbacks on the NFL level to keep them protected. Do we not think that if you're not a running back that can help keep the quarterback protected, they ain't going to send your ass to the bench? I mean,
right.
they changed all the rules to keep these guys upright. And so if the guys you got on the field can't do it, you ain't going to be out there for very long. But you're right.
It's a good general point to any fan that's out there that has that question. Why doesn't so and so play at running back more often? That always needs to be your first guess. If it's a kid that is talented with the ball and you wonder why he doesn't play more, that's your answer more times than not.
Yes, that fantastic point. And so what I'm gonna do is some of these, like, I'm realizing they run really long, and as we're sitting there watching them, it's like, man, that's like 5 straight minutes of coach speak. So we'll skip some of these. They talked about the wide receivers. We'll just talk about it and kind of what they said. We will do offensive line because I thought some of what they were talking about with Olas and stuff was pretty important. But with the wide receiver room, Rico Scott was brought up. They love his versatility to play a lot of the different spots. They said they weren't surprised by what he did this spring because they started to see at the end of last year. They talked about Isaiah Horton and him coming in. I do think it was, worth pointing out something I've mentioned with Isaiah Horton, because when he first committed, you see 6'4", you see 200 plus pounds, you see this guy that can win vertically, win the contested catches. He's always been capable of that, but when I actually went and turned on the tape, he didn't get those opportunities much in Miami's offense. And so it's like, that's something that he's capable of, and we've heard about him doing that quite a bit in spring practice. But the thing that I noticed when watching the tape was how effective he was over the middle of the field and the in-breaking routes. And that's something that Kalen DeBoer taught, he specifically said, the in-breaking routes, you really don't see a guy that size doing some of the things that he's able to do on that. That makes him more of a complete receiver. It also makes him, I've always thought that Rome Odunze was a lot more effective over the middle of the field than you would think for a guy his size and stuff, as far as like the route running and in-breaking routes. And, obviously he's a big body guy, so he wasn't really afraid to go over the middle of the field. It wasn't necessarily from that standpoint. But, that's something that I thought was interesting. But just with this wide receiver room, how deep it is, how well some guys have been doing, like he talked about how he thought they nailed the freshman evaluations with Latsier Brooks and Derek Meadows. Jimmy, based off of what they said, based off of your thoughts, what do you think about this wide receiver room?
Well, I'll start with, first of all, Ryan Williams this year. This is his opportunity, even though we didn't see him much this spring. But Ryan has an opportunity this spring to prove that he belongs in a conversation that includes guys like Devontae Smith, David Palmer, Amari Cooper, Julio Jones. Where does Ryan rank in Alabama's all-time group at wide receiver? This is like his year to start building that level of legacy, and I'm such a believer in Ryan. I believe that he will. A healthy Ryan starts proving himself belonging in that group. But Zay Horton's the one I want to talk about the most. You bought him up, and the coaches did. I went into the spring, Clint, hopeful or predicting, or I should say maybe wish casting, which means I'm predicting it, but really it's more of a hope than a prediction, that Isaiah Horton would prove to be the wide receiver 3. Alabama didn't have a wide receiver 3 last year. They had Ryan and Germ in just sort of the room. Alabama really needed a third guy that's like a real legit option for the quarterback. And my hope was that Horton would do that. He was so good this spring, from what I understand, what I've seen and understand. He was so good this spring. I now not only believe that he's easily in the top 3, that he's going to cut into targets intended for Ryan and Germ. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be a focal point of the offense, not simply the complementary piece that they needed, but a focal point of the offense. I think we see a ton of Zay. I also think that there's 7 other guys in that room, certainly 6 that deserve targets. I don't know that we said that a year ago and meant it. This year you do. There's so many good options, from Hale to Rico to Bach to Cole Adams, who's dependable, to Derek Meadows and Latsier Brooks, who weren't true freshmen this spring. They looked like, I thought, from what I heard leading into practice 15, Latsier Brooks had been a revelation, and maybe not so much in practice 15, but who was Derek Meadows, who looked absolutely ready to play SEC football to me on Saturday. So this room is deep. I love the first 3. Gosh, getting all these guys targets and minutes, they're going to have to meet with Nate Oates about how to do this, about how to carve up minutes and targets for that wide receiver group, because you're leaving some people out that could play more minutes. But for everybody out there, I hope I don't have to say this too many times, though I'm sure I will. But for every comment you'll see, it's like, why don't we throw the ball to Bachway? Why don't we throw the ball to Cole? Why don't we throw the ball to Jalen Hale? Every time you ask that, you're taking a ball away from Ryan Williams. Why would you ever do that? They're not going to do that on Sunday. I mean, for every time you want to see it thrown to someone else, you're taking a ball away from Ryan, or away from Germ, or away from Zay. If they're the 3 best guys in the room, they need the most targets and the most snaps.
That what I like about this wide receiver room is I don't think you're going to be in a situation where Ryan Williams is going to be getting 17 or 18 targets, where you kind of feel like you got to force feed him. It's a hostile environment in Knoxville. It's a tough defense to be going against, and it's like, hey, let's just go to the guy. Like, and part of that was like what Tennessee's given you, because it's not always like he wasn't always designed as the primary read, but it just felt like that for whatever reason, and especially in that particular game, Ryan Williams became the safety blanket. Now, Jalen Milroe couldn't get anything done in that game, so a lot of off-target throws, but I just think that you're going to have multiple trusted targets no matter the situation. What I like about this wide receiver room versus, okay, like the wideouts, they were all like very similar. Like they could win at all three levels. They were kind of interchangeable, can play inside, can play outside. I mean, it's 4 first-round picks too. So, I mean, obviously, as good as I think this wide receiver room is, when you can exchange it for 4 kind of bona fide first-round picks, you probably do it. But what I like about this room compared to that worked with Tua Tagovailoa and the preciseness, you know, the accuracy, the ball placement, and all that stuff. One of the best I've ever seen at that kind of thing. So having 4 of essentially the same guy, which all fit that, was lethal. What I like about this room is it's more of like you got your prototypical X, the bigger body guy. You got your prototypical like Z in Ryan Williams. You got a guy who is kind of that bigger, thicker, good, crafty route runner, but physical H or slot. But then at the same time, you're not limited to that. Like you're going to see Ryan Williams moving to the slot. You're going to see Jeremy Bernard playing the Z. Like in this on a day, because Ryan Williams wasn't out there, and it is possible that Ryan Williams is quote unquote the starting slot, but I saw Jeremy Bernard at the Z and Rico Scott, who was the third receiver, and he was working with the first team with Ryan Williams out. He was in the slot to start. I do think it's possible that Ryan Williams is the Z and Jeremy Bernard is the slot to start games, but you can move those guys around. They have mentioned that Isaiah Horton can get moved around. I mean, he was a guy who pretty much, I mean, outside, I think 95% of his snaps at Miami were spent as an outside receiver. Very rarely was a slot guy. But they keep bringing it up, so I'm not going to ignore it. I just haven't really seen it too much yet. But, you know, they'll probably move him around, create some mismatches where those opportunities present itself. But this wide receiver room, man, very deep, very good. And once again, he talked about nailing the freshman evaluations and bringing those 2 guys in. We got to remember, 3 of the 4 recruiting services had Derek Meadows as somewhere between wide receiver like 20 and 30. Latsier Brooks was a 3-star according to 2 of the 4 recruiting services.
Yeah.
So these weren't like super highly ranked guys. But I mean, when Bama fans turned the tape on, especially with Latsier Brooks, everybody knew outside of on 3, the recruiting services have got it wrong. This guy is way better than that. And he's proving that. But that's great evaluation by the coaching staff. And then what I love is that with Isaiah Horton, they are talking about his mentality and this hunger that he's come in with. You know, he's got the right stuff mentally. And so, like, that's not only are you getting a super impactful player from the transfer portal, but you're also getting a guy who fits what you're trying to build culturally. And it's like you talk, whether it's the transfer portal or the freshman, this coaching staff has completely dominated the evaluations when it comes to the wide receiver room. And you were going to have Rico Scott. You were going to have Jalen Mbakwe. You were going to have Jalen Hill coming back. You were going to have Cole Adams. And you were going to have your top 2 guys from last year. So it was still going to be a good wide receiver room. But they have changed with their evaluations, all 3 guys being what I think are going to be dudes. They have completely changed both the short and long term, the depth of the wide receiver room, the impact of the wide receiver room. And we cannot overlook that. It is a phenomenal job by this coaching staff.
It kind of went last year from Ryan. I mean, I'm not being overly critical. I don't mean it to come across as terrible as it sounds, but it sort of felt like last year it was Ryan and Germ and then kind of a mess.
Right.
Because again, a stat to bring up all the time, Ryan and Jeremy caught twice as many balls as the rest of the wide receiver room combined. So there was there were some injuries that affect. I mean, Jalen Hale might have made a difference. Cole Adams got hurt and then he was out the rest of the year and he was helping. So maybe some injuries affected things. And K-Law, you know, he certainly helped. And Kobe Prentice made plays here and there. But in general, Caleb Odom But in general, it was Ryan and Germ and kind of a mess. This year, it feels like Ryan and Germ may headline the room, but it is a room. I mean, this is a room where everyone is contributing, and it's just going to be hard finding enough minutes out there and enough snaps to keep everybody happy and moving the players around. I'll say about that, the advantage that brings. Imagine if you're the slot defender, that nickel defender on the other team, and think of a basketball player who's asked, okay, on this trip down the floor, you're going to guard the point guard. But on the next trip down the floor, you're going to guard the power forward.
Right.
And on that third trip down the floor, you're going to cover the center. I mean, no basketball player's going to be asked. The only guy that comes to mind that can do stuff like that is Herb Jones, who's like one of the best defenders in the NBA.
Right.
That's what you're asking a college football player to do when on one snap, you're man-to-man with Ryan, and the next snap, you're man-to-man with Zay.
Right.
You know? Or then the next snap, it's Latsier. Or the next snap, it's 6'6" Derek Meadows. I mean, that is really putting defenders in a mess. Very few, even in the SEC, guys can cover that range of guys. So the more you move them around, the more you're kind of wearing out the defense in terms of, gosh, I can barely run with Ryan. And now this is Zay Horton, guys, 6'4", and Meadows is 6'6", and then Latsier Brooks just ran past me. I mean, I just like the total makeup of the room and the fact that they can move them around like chess pieces. It's really exciting.
It is. And I still don't know, as you continue to work down the depth chart, I still don't know exactly what the pecking order is going to look like. Here's what I am pretty confident in. Ryan Williams is probably, maybe not, I would think from a target perspective, I think there's some game. I think it's more of like, Ryan's probably going to be your alpha number 1. Jeremy's going to be your number 2, but 2A. Isaiah Horton's going to be 2B. I don't view him as a wide receiver 3. There are going to be some games where he gets more targets, more action. He's going to have a bigger impact, and I think it's going to be pretty evenly split between those two. And I think Rico Scott is pretty much, in my opinion, solidified himself as wide receiver 4. And so you're going to see what I like about Scott and the fact that he can play all 3 is, Ryan Williams was technically, quote unquote, the starter at the X last year. So because he's surprisingly good at getting off press coverage when he's having to play on the line of scrimmage than you would think for a guy his size. But, so there are going to be times where, okay, Isaiah Horton goes to the bench, Ryan Williams goes to the X, Jeremy Bernard goes from the slot to the Z, and you bring in Rico Scott at the H. Or maybe you bring in Rico Scott at the Z and move Ryan Williams over. Maybe Ryan Williams goes to the bench and Rico comes in at the Z. Maybe he comes in the slot. So, like, between those 3 guys, I think you can move guys around, create some mismatches, having a lot of fun with it. And then everything else beyond that, which there is going to be some beyond that, I can assure you, it's going to be just amplifying that. It's more matchups. It's more opportunities. It's, if you deal with some injuries, you might, heaven forbid, but, hopefully you don't have another Jalen Hill situation. If Alabama would have had Jalen Hill last year, I think they don't have to focus so much on 2 guys. I think that between Jeremy, Ryan, and Jalen Hill's ability to win vertically downfield, former top 50 talent, had shown some progress and some growth as a freshman. I think they would have had 3 receivers more in the style or mold of a Kalen DeBoer typical offense. But you lose him, and really you can't go beyond that. Like that now it's, okay, Kendrick Law can be a good player, but he's more gadgety. You can only do certain things with him. You implement his physicality in the offense. You talk about Kobe Prentice, really not a guy who's going to play a lot on the outside, kind of limited to the slot. That's where he does a lot of his, his best work. It's like, so once Jalen Hill went out, they were kind of, I think that's where you started to see some limitations within the wide receiver room, and I just don't think those limitations are going to exist, even if you lose 1 or 2 guys to an injury. So that makes this group really special. We'll listen to this about the offensive line, because a lot of great information, I feel like, and we'll see if we can't react to it after.
About the offensive line this spring with some of the injuries you had, some young guys getting more reps.
Yeah. We had more versatility than I initially anticipated. And what I mean by that is Olas was a guy that got out there and played left tackle almost every day, but certainly had opportunity at left guard. And I think Olas could play left tackle. I think he could play right tackle. I think he could play left guard. So you see a guy like that is cleanly able to function from the outside to the inside, you're really happy about the versatility you can get there. So he's one guy that stood out. I thought Cam and Gino were guys that really stood out as far as they could play left guard and right guard, and then Gino could play left, right, or center. So that part, you just look at those three players right there from the interior standpoint, and man, you feel really excited about where you're at and where you're going. So those are guys that showed up every single day.
Wondering what development you've seen out of the Arkell Nungwam, the Ball State transfer, kind of the progress that he's made over the course of this.
Yeah, I thought Arkell, really did a nice job. Worked a lot. He worked both sides, right and left tackle. And I think that was probably new to him. He is young to the game of football in general. So I think, as far as a project type player, that would certainly be kind of fit the mold for where he's at. His commitment level is off the charts. He stays after every practice and, tries to work drills, and just really, I think for him right now as a developmental player, he is just trying to get his skill set where it needs to be so that he can compete consistently.
Wilkin Formby was a guy who maybe battled the learning curve a little bit last year. I'm curious what you saw in terms of progress with him at right tackle.
Well, Wilkin, one of his things was the physical part, just like any young offensive lineman. And, tip of the cap to Dave Ballou and his staff. Nobody does it better anywhere in the country than them. And where Wilkin's at now compared to where he was at physically last year, there's a big body of work that's been done. And I thought even just if you just take run blocking, Wilkin had to work a ton at pad level, hand placement, just being able to engage people when he, obviously a longer player. And I thought you could see the physical development with him. He just looked like a different player out there very early on, because my early impression, of Wilkin was just the film that I had seen from last year. And, guys like that, you come into a situation like this and you hope that they've made some big strides. And I certainly think Wilkin had done that and was really happy with where he ended up this spring. He's got a long ways to go, still got a ton of work to do. He knows that, and he's ready to get to work.
Can you speak to the spring that Wilkin Formby had and also a couple of the backup offensive tackles?
Yeah. Wilkin, he's really come along a long ways. And we just met this morning, a group of us with him. And I think the thing that, you lose sight of sometimes is if you flipped on the film a year ago, what would it look like? We're in it every single day with him, and he's just focused on the now. But, you peel back a little bit, and it's I think sometimes you forget how far a guy has come, and that's the case with him. And it's a physical piece. It's a discipline piece for every guy, but I think as an offensive lineman, especially a tackle, there's so many little details now that he's picking up on that he wouldn't have picked up on even late in the season last year. And so it's more reps. It's just another cycle through, just like for all these guys of relearning the system, hearing the details again over and over, adding to your game. But he's gotten stronger. He's more confident. He's still, again, every day, got to get better. He's a tackle for us that, we need to rely on to get it done, not just at an okay level, at an elite level to accomplish our goals. And I think the other guy to point out would be Olas. Olas just did a nice job having to move around a little bit. I think his probably flexibility to move different spots. You thought of him as more as an interior guy. He really continues to reshape his body and do some things that I think have really lent him to us feeling very comfortable with him in multiple spots, left side, right side, inside, outside. So I'm really proud of him. I think Arkell is a guy that's coming along. He's a developmental player, but doing a great job. His heart's in it. The guys love him. He works extremely hard. He's a blessing to have here for sure. The young guys, I think, getting thrown in the fire. Jackson Lloyd, Michael Carroll, they are going to be phenomenal football players, at tackle. They have different strengths. They come from, opposite ends of the country, obviously, but their exposure to different things. But they actually, were really impressive, I think, and how far they've come. I'm excited about their future for sure.
So, Jimmy, what do you think about the offensive line? What do you think about Olas Alinen and kind of his development? Obviously, you got some other guys. Obviously, this offensive line is a critical piece for the success of Alabama in 2025. What do you think about the development, both what you heard, maybe some of the things that you saw on A-Day, and also, what you've heard maybe from sources?
Think of the offensive line. I think some spots are just locked down. I mean, Caden Proctor's going to be the left tackle, and Parker Brailsford's going to be the center, and Jaden Roberts is going to be the right guard. I've always thrown Wilkin Formby into that group, and I think after hearing Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer's comments, I think most people should that Wilkin Formby, who really is a returning starter to this team. Let's remember, Wilkin Formby won the starting right tackle job last summer, and now is much better. You heard them say, boy, he's a lot better than he was. He won the starting right tackle job last fall before he had a tough game, in week 2 and was replaced. Came back late in the year and frankly was playing just as good as the other guy, down the stretch last year. So I think those 4 are just set, and there's only really left guard. And what's exciting to me is with Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer going over so many names, you can't help but feel good about left guard. Someone's going to be good enough. Maybe it's a surprise like Olas, who's played a lot of guard at Alabama, but you got Geno Vandermark, who's played a lot of college football. Cam Dewberry's played a lot of college football. They mentioned those guys. They're excited about those guys. And then as far as the second group goes, that you hope you don't get to, what you hope is your starting 5 offensive linemen are still your starting 5 in November against Auburn. That's what you hope. But that second starting 5, I think there will be some freshmen in it, like a big Mike Carroll and Jackson Lloyd, and it's very exciting that they have futures. I think this offensive line situation is the best it's been in a while at Alabama, and by that I mean the starting group looks really solid and sort of veteran to me. It's a veteran, good, solid offensive line with all-star candidates like Proctor, like Brailsford. But then the second team, there are probably not a lot of guys on that second team who are ready, but the future, the ceiling for Lloyd and Carroll and even Olas, who's likely a 2, the ceiling is fantastic for that too. So this is the best situation Alabama's had in a while up front, seems to me.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I know some people aren't going to believe that because it's like, okay, you guys have been hyping up the offensive line for the last couple of years,
Right.
like especially a couple of years ago. I was on the offensive line and know, a bunch of people like the national guys, they were hearing the same things we were, Cole Kublick and Josh Pate and all those guys. And it ended up being far from it. I think last year's dysfunction as far as the offense, I don't place a whole lot of that on the offensive line. I place some. But, I think one of the main problems, and the offensive line contributed at times to this, but one of the main issues with how Alabama's offense was structured last year was their inability to win on early downs, created unfavorable third downs, and the offensive line wasn't built for third down situations. Caden Proctor is a guy who you want it to be 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2, and it's like defense don't know if they're throwing the football, if they're running the football, and that way you can kind of keep him protected. If you ask him on a 3rd and 9 or a 3rd and 11 or whatever to just, hey, they know you're going to be pass blocking, his size and stuff, you can beat him with SEC edge speed, and Elijah Pritchett was very much set up the same way. So that is something that I think being better on early downs will help protect the offensive line. I think through scheme and the way that they like to use a lot of diversity as far as the run game really puts a strain on defenses, doesn't allow them to really pin their ears back. They play very timid. They play very east-west instead of penetrative. And I think that helps as far as, your pass protections, things like that I think will aid them. But I also agree with you that, I think right now, especially in like a transfer portal era, and this is, I guess, more so NFL-esque, but I think if you can get yourself in really good position, if you can get yourself 3 to 4 really good starters, if you can, and then have a 5th starter that's like he's serviceable, but it playing between 2 really good starters, if it's at left guard there, it's like, okay, he's good enough where playing next to those 2 guys, he can get the job done, and the unit as a whole is effective as a result. If you can get that, and then you can get what I would call, like I think have a primary rotational interior offensive lineman. If someone goes down, you got a guy that you can trust. He's got experience, or it could be a young guy too, but could come in at center or either of the 2 guard spots. That's great. That's something that Gino Vandermark did extremely well last year. He came in for Jaden Roberts quite a bit at times. Tyler Booker's helmet would come off. He'd come in at left guard. He played some center, and he was an experienced guy. He ended up actually having to start at right guard for Jaden Roberts last year, but I think he could potentially continue in that role. But that, if you got that guy, then if you got yourself what I would call like a swing tackle, where if you have an injury to one of your two starters, he can kind of come in. Maybe it's not a swing. Maybe it's a true backup like right tackle, where if something happened, and this is not going to be the case with Alabama, I'm just speaking hypothetically, where something happened to Caden Proctor, instead of bringing in somebody to replace him, maybe it's a guy who is more comfortable on the right side, but Wilkin can be your swing guy. So you kick Wilkin over to left, and then you insert that guy at right. But either way, having a third tackle that you can trust, and then having a guy with like guard tackle versatility, that gives you 8. And so if you can get that, I think your offensive line's in really good shape. And I might sound like I'm molding these comments to fit kind of where Alabama is trending, but I'm really not. I think that is like NFL teams, that's like ideal. It's way tougher nowadays because offensive line play has dropped off significantly, both on college level and NFL, but mostly on the NFL level. But I think with the way that Olas has been trending, he can be that guard tackle. You've got a guy, we think is probably going to be like Jackson Lloyd, Arco Anugum. It just feels like he's going to be more of a long-term play, but I really like the physical makeup of him. But if Jackson Lloyd can be that third tackle, or maybe you just have to jump him if he's not ready, especially early on, and go to Olas, maybe that ends up being the case. But then Gino being like that first guy off the bench for any of your interior spots. Right. And, you got what we think is going to be like a serviceable, not great, but not bad Cam Dewberry at left guard. Wilkin Formby's improved at right tackle. It kind of fits exactly what we're talking about. Plus, you've got other potential options. How does Michael Carroll continue to improve over the course of the season? Can he become, that guy where maybe you don't want him at left tackle, but you can put him in at right tackle? Maybe Wilkin's probably not going to kick over, but you see what I'm saying. That's why I like Alabama's offensive line this year, Jimmy.
Yeah, number of options, number of veteran options. I think Michael Carroll's gonna be good. I think Jackson Lloyd's gonna be good, but you're not dependent on him. That's where, sometimes you're depending on a freshman and he comes through. But that's not the ideal situation for an Alabama or a Georgia or an Ohio State or a Texas to put all the eggs in the basket of a freshman. What you want is veterans you can rely on, and then your incoming stars develop at their own pace. And I think that's what Alabama's got. And I love the versatility and the options that they have. And I'll be surprised if they're not good. Is it going to be 2020? Is it going to be 2012, which was an outstanding offensive line? No. But it's going to be solid. And when you have exciting skill talent, solid is all you need to be.
That's right. And one of the other things that the coaching staff mentioned was one of them. I think it was Kalen DeBoer. I think he was also followed up and asked about it, but kind of, a guy like Olas, like, you come in thinking he's going to be a guard, and then you kind of see him work and kind of reshape his body, and he's playing tackle throughout the spring, and you see him improving there. And it's like, maybe he can be a tackle. Michael Carroll, a guy long-term they talked about, they thought bringing him in, he was going to be a guard. Maybe they're seeing him at tackle. They like how he's developing there. And he mentioned a guy who they kind of thought about, at a previous stop, ended up being a first-round draft pick who they kind of thought would be a guard, but turned out to be a tackle. And that was Troy, in my opinion. I think it was Troy Fatanu. I don't even know how you say his last name, but he was only 6'4", about 317 pounds. Ended up having, 34-plus-inch arms. So he had the length, and he actually got drafted into the NFL to play tackle. But there was a huge question of whether he played guard.
It's like a third-round pick. It
was a first round. He was
first round pick. Okay.
Yeah. He went to the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 20 overall. But that was a guy who he played some guard for Washington. He played some tackle, and I think the coaching staff early on, especially in 2022, they were like, okay, is this guy going to be a guard? Is this guy going to be a tackle? And he ended up being a tackle and the left tackle, the blind side, and ended up being a really good player. And then he got drafted in the first round. So it's like sometimes you think a guy's going to look a certain way or need to play a certain position, and it ends up not being the case. All right, Jimmy, well, that's going to do it. We appreciate you so much, just the time that you were willing to spend with us, over an hour here talking about the offense. Just a lot of great conversations. Is there anything else that you want to add before we hop out of here, brother?
just that we're going to see a more comfortable Kalen DeBoer with Ryan Grubb. And just another reminder that in year 2 at Fresno, DeBoer won the Washington job. At year 2 at Washington, he won the Alabama job. It's now year 2 at Alabama. What's he going to win?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, man. Appreciate you as always, brother. And once again, we are brought to you by Pearl River Resort and MyBookie. Head on over to mybookie.ag. Use the promo code Crimson. Jimmy, once again, appreciate you, and we'll have to do this again soon.